Gold at 1645. The dollar teasing triple digits. Bond yields coming down. Juniors are starting to respond. Most of them don't care, but we are seeing some life out there. Money is being raised. We're going to talk coronavirus. That is escalating a bit. We're going to talk takeouts. We're going to talk the Trumpster. We're going to talk MAGA Pigeons, Victoria's Secret, Bloomberg, the debates, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I am Gerardo Del Real along with my co-host, Mr. Nick Hodge. This is episode 58 of Bizarro World. Mr. Hodge, how are you, senor?
I'm reminded of this story I read a couple of weeks ago about how a certain percentage of pigeons had human hair tied around their toes. And that's why some pigeons you see walking around in parks, particularly areas with high human population density, have jacked up toes because they had human hair wrapped around them. I'm doing good, Gerardo. How's it going?
That may be the single best answer to how are you doing I've received in quite some time. I am well also. Thank you for asking. I don't have an equally intelligent or insightful response. But let's get right to it. Big week for gold. It closed at the 1643 level, and it did so, impressive to me, it did so despite a rising dollar. It was up on the week. It got as high as 99.82, the dollar index. It pulled back and closed at 99.32, but good week for the dollar, good week, great week for gold, great week for silver. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Mr. Hodge.
No, I want to hear your thoughts, Gerardo, because I watched this Bloomberg segment on TV yesterday where they had this chartist guy on, some, I don't know, New York fund guy. And they were charting like the dollar, and they were charting, finally mentioning gold on Bloomberg. They were charting the GDX. And this guy was saying that GDX is on the verge of breaking out. And if gold could break out even further than it has, then GDX could do really well. These are things that you and I follow, of course. But then the host asked him, but dollar is going up as well, and people don't understand this. What say you? And I was thinking, well, these guys haven't been reading Gerardo for 2 years, and so you tell them, Gerardo.
Well, it's a very simple premise, right? At the end of the day, I don't consider myself much of an expert on anything, but I do think that it becomes easy to take big, complicated scenarios and connect the dots, and I'm halfway decent at that at times. And this is something for years that I said, listen, you know, it's that 2016 head fake that we got with the dollar wasn't real because it didn't coincide with rising U.S. indices and a rising dollar. And the premise for me had always been either a black swan event like a coronavirus, which we're seeing now, or a distorted bond market overseas that leads to capital flight, leaving other parts of the world and flooding the U.S. Now, where is that money? Where is that capital likely to go? Well, we know that the most liquid market in the world is the treasury market, right? Bonds. And so no brainer to me. I mean, I don't have to be a bond expert to know that if we had a black swan event, and there's always one lingering, or we had issues overseas with Japan and Europe's bond market, that capital was going to come into treasuries. So I don't think it's a coincidence that we just printed a record low for the 30-year bond. We have a 10-year that hit a low of 145. We record this on Friday. It closed at 147. And so I sent you a message, I believe it was Monday morning or Sunday or something, and I said, we're going to get $1,600 gold
going
this
to
week.
1,600.
It's going to go into 1,600. It's doing it, and it was at 1,580 at the time. And the reason was just me watching the bond market. It's, if you want to know what's happening in the world, start with the bond market. This is a clear flight to safety. Growth is already slow in Europe. Growth was already slow in Japan. And, you know, when you have hundreds of millions of people quarantined, that's going to affect, outside of the real human toll that it takes. Lives are being lost. People are sick. We'll talk about that in a minute. You know, we have 3 cases in San Antonio, people that were flown in here about an hour and a half from where I am. You live in Spokane. I know you have some cases there, people that have been flown in there. So it's definitely escalating, and capital is afraid. And anytime capital is afraid, it's going to go where it's treated best. And big capital requires big liquidity. The gold market can't provide it, but the bond market can. And so we saw that this week. The minute I saw the 10-year yield coming down, that's when I sent you the message. I said gold's going to, get through the 1600 phase. I've said repeatedly, small amounts of capital into the gold market will make a big difference. I also said at the end of last year that you could expect $100 and $200 weekly moves in the price of gold. I think we're on the cusp of that. I think we're just getting started. And frankly, there's not much resistance all the way up to 1670 at this point. So I hope that's
my next question, right? I mean, so I'm looking at I'm looking at the chart, and the last time gold went through 1600 in 2011, it quickly went to all-time highs, like went through 1600 in June, I believe, and then by September was at 1900. So it's little precedent right here to base things on. What are your thoughts on that? What happens next?
I think we go all the way up to 1670, and then we're going to let the numbers and the market dictate what happens next, right? Just like there wasn't much of a gap between that $1,350 and $1,500 level. Then we got a bit of a consolidation, right? The 1670 level is the old 1460. I remember saying if we break through 1460, or I think it was 1464, then we're getting past 1500. If we can break through 1670 on the US side, then I think we're off to the races and going past 1700. I don't know if we're ready for that yet. The month end closing this month will be a deciding factor. Try to not be emotional about these things and get too excited. You want to play it by the numbers, or you're going to get caught falling in love with your own opinion, right?
No, that's exactly right. And so, I've just been sort of looking at my holdings this week, seeing maybe what I want to add to, but certainly not making any rash decisions when gold is moving $20, $30 in one direction at any given time.
Agreed. And, I started the day and I was a bit disappointed because the juniors weren't responding after lunch. There was a move in quite a few of the juniors that I hold and some that I watch. And so I'm encouraged by that. It'll be interesting to see post PDAC what that looks like. I know you'll be out there. It's interesting, right? We typically sell off in the juniors, but with this momentum, if we do get past that 1670 level, it could get really, really interesting. We talked last week about the fact that companies were raising money. They're finally exploring. I got a letter that I'm going to feature in the next issue of Junior Mining Monthly, which is the premium service, of course, that I write for Outsider Club. And I won't share too much, but I had, a disgruntled and rightfully so subscriber that said, "Hey, look, Gerardo, you've been at this since 2016. I've been a loyal subscriber. Most positions are down. We're down 30, 40%, more in some cases. Sure, there's been a couple of winners, but for the most part, like you've gotten it wrong." And he was absolutely correct as far as the stocks go. I don't need to go into the details. We all know what the resource sector has been from, post mid 2016 up until now. But my response to him, and again, I won't give it all away, but my response was, we haven't had the market for the higher risk, higher reward companies that I gravitate towards, for those to explore. We haven't had the market, frankly, for those companies to even raise capital to be able to explore. So there's been a bunch of companies in the portfolio whose assets I really like, management teams I really like, who just haven't been able to do any meaningful work. And we're finally at the point where those companies are raising money, have significant drill programs that are starting up. And, my short answer to him was, please stick around for 2020 and let the portfolio perform, because we're finally at the point where these companies are getting some work done. Doesn't mean that they're all going to hit. We know the game, we know the odds, but a good percentage of those companies, I'm very confident, will make significant discoveries and or get revalued higher. And it'll be worth the wait. So that's that. That's kind of where we're at. That's the market we're in, I believe. Thoughts, Nick?
No, that's it. Next week, you're going to see a very busy week, right? Everybody's going to, of course, rush to get out their news releases so they can discuss them at PDAC. And so there's going to be a ton of news, more news than there has been in recent years because of what you just said. And so, there's many more active companies. There's many more opportunities. There's many more catalysts. And it's been busy.
Let's talk about another disgruntled subscriber whose email I received this past week, who I already responded to. So I'll share that one. The gist of the email said, "Hey, look, Advantage Lithium. You and I talked about it on the podcast before. I said in late 2019 that I thought the lithium stocks, the quality ones, were at a bottom. And I think, that's been proven correct for the most part. I don't think they're going to continue to go straight up, especially with coronavirus. We'll talk more about coronavirus in a second. I think that slowed things down. But I was on Orocobre's conference call yesterday evening, and they made it clear that they expect a very robust, active second half of the year. And as a result, they went ahead and bought out Advantage Lithium. The subscriber who wrote in and said, hey, look, you initially recommended this company at 90 cents. We were hoping to make $1.50, $2 a share on Advantage Lithium shares. We've held for a couple of years, and now, they're being bought out for the equivalent of 42, 43, 44 cents. And my response to him was, the buyout is a step in that run up. It's not the end game, right? So if you sell the shares of Orocobre, which is the company that's buying Advantage out, sure, you're stopped out at the 42, 43, 44 cent level. I believe that Orocobre shares are going to bring liquidity, and they have plenty of upside. And I still believe that we're going to see that run up that finally makes that a profitable position, because the asset had always begged for consolidation. But again, Advantage is a perfect example of a company that I visited in Argentina, vetted the management team, vetted the asset. They delivered. They got the resource up. The chemistry is beautiful. The real estate play, we got that spot on. We recognized early on that it was a fractured real estate package that would have to be consolidated. That's now happened. And I still think there's more consolidation in that basin. I don't think that's a 3-company basin. I think it's a 1-company basin. And eventually that'll happen. But, you have to take it one step at a time. So Advantage Lithium, yeah, it's at, 38, 40 cents right now. This thing hit a 52-week low of 13 cents not too long ago. And so a move from these levels after the buyout to much higher levels, I definitely think it's in the cards. And it's why I've advised subscribers and myself, I own a lot of shares, to hold Orocobre shares.
Yeah, I don't think anyone thought that the buyout was going to come here. There was talk of maybe bringing in another strategic or a partner, maybe a Chinese company. And so, I had it in my letter as well. And so it got taken out sort of right at the price that the average in price that we were in at. We were fortunate enough to buy another whack of stock late last year when it was at those lows you just mentioned. And I advise the same thing. You got to stay with the thesis, and you gotta stay with the Orocobre shares. This isn't one that you use this liquidity event to sell your shares and move on. This is when you take your shares in Orocobre and you keep them to participate in the future upside of the lithium market, which you and I discuss routinely.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the fact that you encourage subscribers, new and old, to average down and buy if they could. And I realize not everybody can. But we advised multiple times. I advised multiple times when it was down at the 15, 20 cent level. If you can, double down on your position. If you can add some. If you don't own it, consider yourself lucky and buy some at these levels. It's an absolute bargain. But, I completely get it. If you bought in at 90 cents and you've held it and you didn't average down when it was 15, 20, 25, 30 cents, and now you're getting taken out at 42, 43, 44 cents, I completely understand the frustration. But again, this is one step in a multi-step dance, right? So for those of you listening that are Advantage shareholders, I encourage everybody to hold those shares. And the other thing is this: you mentioned the potential for a strategic to come in or other potential suitors. Look, the breakup fee on that deal is $1 million. If there is another suitor out there that appreciates the strategic value and the quality of the resource in the basin, $1 million is pennies for a big company to come in to take that asset back from Orocobre, the 75% of it. So I'm not completely ruling that out. I say all that to say there's a lot of upside from here. And I think 2020 is going to be just a fantastic year for the better names. Lithium Americas has had a great run. I think they're just getting started. Orocobre, I believe, is going to have a great year. And, I could go on. So I'll leave it there.
Okay.
What else is on your mind, Mr. Hodge? Do we want to talk about how serious coronavirus is getting? I've referenced it multiple times. It obviously is the talk of the town. The overall indices were down today in large part because most people are anticipating this to continue to escalate at least for a bit. I mentioned the fact that there's 3 new cases that were flown into an hour and a half away from where I live, flown into San Antonio. I believe you have 5 in Spokane. So let me hear what you think, Nick, how it's affecting the global economy. We've seen some numbers today. They didn't look good. I'll give you my thoughts later as to where this leads, but I'd love to hear your thoughts first.
Well, first of all, I think it's still early. I think we don't have all the information we need to make good decisions, whether that's intentional or not. I'm not sure. I think that we don't have a good handle yet on the incubation period, and so they haven't been able to determine with high accuracy exactly how many people that have been exposed are actually infected. And so there's a lot we don't know. So I'll start there. I think that the next couple of weeks are going to be very revealing. One thing we know is that it's already being mentioned by major international corporations. Apple said it was going to impact sales. We know Foxconn isn't running at full capacity. I've seen reports coming out of China that don't corroborate what they're saying about people getting back to work and cities functioning normally, and not just in Wuhan, but in other cities as well. Marin Katusa sent out some charts this morning showing traffic patterns in major Chinese cities. And thankfully, in 2020, we have charts that monitor such things. And you can see very clearly that the volume of traffic is only 10 to 20% of what it typically would be in China in various cities. And so that's a fact. I mean, that's data, right? So interpret that however you want. The other thing is that it's spreading, right? So you have clusters now in Japan. You have a couple of dozen cases, I think, last I read, in South Korea. You have multiple deaths in Iran. So it's spreading geographically, obviously, wider. There is mass quarantines going on, both on land and in floating ships, right? Cruise ships, where there was 700 people infected. And so this all makes for a frenzy for media, of course, right? There's people dying. There's a mass outbreak. That's perfect for cryons and breaking news. And things like that. And then so you step back and you look at things like the mortality rate. And is it that fatal? We don't know. 2.5% mortality. Influenza less than like 0.5%, for example. Gosh, I don't know. I feel like I'm starting to ramble, but I'm just giving you what I know and what I'm seeing. There's like over 2,000 deaths right now. And you say, you talk about people being brought to San Antonio and Spokane yesterday. They said they were going to bring 5 here. I think they ended up bringing 4. They're in the Sacred Heart Hospital here. I can see it from my office window. So they're literally right across the highway. I guess there's some sort of specialized respiratory unit there that only 10 other hospitals in the country have. I guess one of the hospitals in San Antonio has one of them. And that sort of got me thinking, why the fuck do only 10 hospitals in the country have the specialized respiratory unit? Anyway.
It's a whole nother podcast.
And so, look, I don't think we know, but it's clearly going to impact global supply chains and manufacturing and car sales. Apple is saying as much. Dow was down, I think, 1% each of the past 2 days. And so it remains to be seen, but it's definitely spreading for sure.
Agreed. And some context, as of Friday today, when we record, there's approximately 77,000 cases now reported globally. All but 1,200 have been reported by China. There's been approximately 2,250 deaths. There was some good news out of the university here in Austin, the University of Texas at Austin. The scientists and researchers made a pretty important and significant breakthrough towards developing a vaccine for the 2019 coronavirus by creating what they call the first 3D atomic scale map of the part of the virus that attaches to and infects human cells. So what they're saying is that mapping this spike protein that they call call it, is a big step for researchers around the world to develop vaccines to combat the virus, right? And so this was just published 2 days ago on February the 19th in the journal Science. And the team that mapped this out is also working on a related vaccine stemming from the research. So there is some good work going into this. There seems to be more collaboration among states and countries. Let's hope that the transparency continues. But yeah, definite impact. And back to my comment earlier about where I think this all leads, outside of the humans whole, I think it provides cover for a Fed cut, which prior to this, I did not think we would get this year because it is an election year and the Fed typically likes to be inactive as to not influence the politics, right? The landscape. But I think this is going to be severe enough economically on a global scale to where we get another cut. So looking forward, if we get a cut in June, right, we have gold here at 1642, 1643. We have a 10-year at 147. We have a 30-year at a record low. You add another cut there. If growth is slowing everywhere else, you still come to the U.S. to have that liquidity and to get a return because it sure in the heck beats negative interest rates, right?
No, that's exactly right. I was talking with a couple of people about that this week, and they were all of the opinion that we still see new highs in U.S. equities.
Agreed. Do we want to talk? Last week, we got in depth about Roger Stone, and we talked about Bill Barr, the attorney general, and you know, him basically stepping on his own prosecutors and saying, no, I don't think you guys know what you're doing. I don't want that guy to get 9 years. I want him to get nothing. And so he's finally been sentenced. Should we get into that?
If you want to talk about it, I didn't pay close attention to Roger Stone, but, you know, related to that and tangential to it was a whole bunch of, pardons and things, white collar crime pardons by Trump. And I know you want to talk about crime, rich people crime versus all other crimes. So it could be a good segue.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly where I was going. I could care less for Roger Stone. I don't believe he'll serve the bulk of his sentence because I do believe that President Trump will pardon him. He's already at the very least spoken on the fact that was an option. And this before the guy even files his appeal. And so it just goes back to my point, right? If, we have Mayor Bloomberg, there was the debate this week and he didn't do particularly great. And a big reason was he got called out on the stop and frisk policies that were enacted by Mayor Giuliani and subsequently continued under Bloomberg's mayorship of New York City. And stop and frisk was simple. Go into minority neighborhoods, black and brown neighborhoods, for the most part, predominantly black and brown neighborhoods, and just randomly push up on a kid, throw him up against the wall, pat him down, see if he's got anything. Rights be damned. Constitution be damned. Whole thing, none of that mattered. And this happened for years. And it was heavily skewed towards minority and lower income neighborhoods. And so him being called out on that Bloomberg was a part of the reason why he didn't do too well this week in the debate, right? Elizabeth Warren and everybody ate his lunch.
Oh, she dug in his butt.
She dug in a lot of people's butts. Amy wasn't happy. Amy's healthcare plan got called a Post-it note. So
I saw that. I think she was also about to rip Pete's throat out.
Agreed. Oh no. She was on the warpath. No pun intended there, right? But she definitely had a very strong performance, and she appeared to be completely in control of the narrative. And it made me want to listen a little bit more. So kudos to her. Back to where I was going with this.
Sorry,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
But she doesn't know the president of your mother country, though, Gerardo.
Well,
anyway,
not only that, and more importantly, she is all for this big Green New Deal. And I'm going to get sidetracked here real quick, but this is an important point. But she also wants to immediately stop all drilling and fracking on public lands, right? Without a review.
Oh, that's Elizabeth Warren. Yeah.
Elizabeth Warren. Yeah. I'm back to Elizabeth Warren. Right. Without a review, without seeing the merits of the drilling, without seeing if it's done responsibly. And this is where she loses me. for all the points that I agree
Yep.
with her on, because there's several. I think her and Bernie are excellent candidates for a lot of the social issues that are important to me. I think they're excellent candidates when it comes to doing away with a lot of the corruption that we're seeing right now, that we're going to talk about here in a bit in relation to President Trump. And both sides, right? We just saw the debacle with the DNC in Iowa, and they don't know how to work an app, and that was intentional. But I actually believe in Bernie and Elizabeth Warren when they speak out against that. What frustrates me as somebody that would like to see a president in office that is rational and factual and believes in science and brings some decency back to the office is when Elizabeth Warren gets to talking about immediately putting, a stop to all commodity drilling, all resource drilling, and then review it. And so when I look at that, and then the very next statement out of her mouth is, we need to make sure we address the climate change issue because it is the existential issue of our time. Those two things just don't make sense. And that's where I begin to wonder about all of the other information, right? There's several people in our industry, in our business that throw shots, rightfully so most of the time, at other newsletter writers or figures in the junior resource industry. And we all enjoy that when it's accurate, right? But every now and then there's been times where I'm privy to the fact that it's just complete BS. And it makes you wonder about the times where you're not privy to the fact as far as how accurate the information is. And it makes you question everything. So with Elizabeth Warren, I question, just how competent some of the other plans are when one is an existential threat, the climate change issue, and the other, the thing that you need, clean energy, nuclear energy, the commodities to develop the infrastructure that's going to allow us to address climate change responsibly. You immediately want to cripple the industry that's going to allow you to do that. Those two things can't exist in the same world at the same time. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I'm not sure, I don't want to put words in her mouth or demean her, but I'm not sure she understands the issue. And this sort of goes back to some of the things that I've talked about over the months. In like the weird solutions to climate change, right? Like the solar roads and this weird stuff that's never going to work. And it's like, she doesn't understand, or I don't think she does. I don't think any of these politicians thoroughly understand the issue and the solutions to it, or else there's no way you would say we're going to outright ban mining in Nevada on federal land. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? The guy there that was there from the Nevada paper. Yep. He was like, but you need copper and lithium for the technologies. Like, I was like, yeah, go you, dude, go you. And so I just don't think they understand the issue. And I think that permeates down the line. I know we want to get back to the Donald Trump and white collar.
Yeah, no, but this is important. This is important.
I saw another topic you had on the list was about kids at some college who didn't want their, I'm sure it's an endowment fund or something, to invest in fossil fuels, right? And it's like, or fossil fuel companies. And it's like, well, who do you think the biggest renewable energy companies are too? Like, like Shell is like, and BP probably the biggest deployer of or among them, wind and solar energy in the world. And so you can't, cut your nose to spite your face, man. And they don't even know they're doing that because they don't understand the nuances, and they don't understand the industry side of things, right? And so, yeah, she's completely wrong on that. And I'm also glad you said that they make sense on a lot of issues, because you're 100% right. Like, I'm watching this and I'm like, yeah, man, like, people should have healthcare like other developed countries do. Like, our system is completely ass backwards, and they're making sense on some things. And I'm like, yeah, that does make sense. And then they're talking about like a 1%, 2% transactions tax, or a 2-cent, wealth tax or whatever. And they start losing me on stuff like this. And I've said it before, they need to focus on the corporations and not the individuals. And so now you got me on the debate, which is something I love. So just give me 2 more seconds and I'll wrap
it all ties in together though, right? You can't talk about the resource space without talking about politics, without talking about geopolitics, without talking about policy. I mean, it's all connected.
And what happens the next day? Bloomberg, who spent already like $500 million, already he spent that, some $450 million on ads.
Coffee money.
Up there in the pool. Exactly right. But no one had yet heard him speak or be debated. Gets up there and falls flat on his face. Elizabeth Warren is talking about him calling women horse-faced lesbians, saying that he's, a narcissistic billionaire in the vein of Donald Trump. And
she ate him up.
She ate him up, man. And so the next day, like, he plummets in the betting markets, and Sanders has still got the lane to the nomination. But ultimately, if you look at the betting markets, Trump is still like a 59 or 60% favorite to win the general election, irrespective of who the Democratic nominee is. And so that's something that no one really wants to face or talk about.
And we've talked about this since the 20-some Democratic candidates announced their run for presidency, right? We said it's not going to matter. We called it last year, and it's playing out exactly as I thought it would. Tying it back into what I was talking about before. Well, actually, before I do that, you mentioned the students of St. John's that were demanding divestiture of all fossil fuel investments, right? And did you hear what St. John's University staff responded?
No.
They said, well, we're not going to do that, but we're happy to turn off the heat if...
Yeah. It's a great response. That's great.
And the student body got, they threw a hissy fit and said, we're trying to have an adult conversation here. I thought it was hilarious. But anyhow, getting back to my point, we talk about the presidency and we talk about the election. And the reason we keep saying Donald Trump is going to win, it's not because we have a dog in the fight. Whether you agree or disagree with Trump being in office, I believe he wins again. And it's because he's been vetted. What is this guy going to do that is going to shock his base out of voting for him? I don't see it. He's openly said he can grab, woman by the what. I don't want to repeat the language. Didn't matter. He's openly dog whistled at, his especially with Stephen Miller, his racist staff, to make sure that they're talking to white supremacists in a language that they understand. That's had real world implications, with several things. And, when those real world consequences happened, he said, hey, there's fine people on both sides, right? This was in response to a young lady getting ran over by white supremacists. That was a response. There's fine people on both sides. And so, if this is a guy, the latest thing was just what I was getting into. He just pardoned 11 people. And again, if you're rich enough in this country, you can mostly rape and commit crime as long as it's white collar crime, at will. Roger Stone just got sentenced to 40 months and the president's already talking about, well, let's see how his appeal goes. And if it doesn't go well, then yeah, I might pardon him. There's a good chance for that. He just pardoned 11 other people. And the one common denominator where these people all had committed white collar crimes, and they're all closely related to the president. Former New York police commissioner, a friend of Giuliani, his police commissioner actually was just pardoned. The former senator from Illinois, is from Chicago and, had been serving 8 years into an 11-year sentence. He was just pardoned for, clear corruption. There wasn't any question. There wasn't any injustice for that gentleman. It was just straight up Illinois governor offering to sell state property in exchange for favors and or money.
Man, that gentleman's hair went gray.
Federal prison will do that to you. Roger Stone's already there. So, we're not going to see that for him. But, on a not so serious note, somebody put on Twitter, and this is where Twitter wins, right? That's the first time that a game show contestant was pardoned by the star of the game show that then became president. I thought that was hilarious. But the real point is, again, to hammer it home, if you're in America and you have enough money and you know the right people, if you just get the timing right, you can almost commit crime at will in this country. You just have to make sure the right people are in office. We just got word that Wells Fargo is reportedly near a $3 billion settlement with the SEC and the DOJ over sales scandal. Again, can you and I or the average Joe buy his way out of, a criminal charge that's a crime for everyone else? Only if I'm rich enough and do it under the disguise of, or in the shadows of a corporation, right? Then it's perfectly okay. If you have enough money to pay the bribe or the fine, Freudian slip, you're going to be all right. Don't worry about criminal charges. just make sure you have enough for the fine. And that's where we're at. And so this is where Bernie and Elizabeth Warren really have me. I support that aspect of their campaign. Kind of like I support Trump's policy on China. I think it was, it's overdue that an administration actually, at the very least entered into serious dialogue about IP protection and some of the other things that they've done in the past and continue to do. But, it's a tragedy that we don't have a candidate up there that has enough money and actually has a moral compass and an understanding that is all encompassing on all issues, right? Because for every time I say, hey, go Elizabeth Warren, I like the anti-corruption approach, then there's the comment about I'm going to stop drilling on all federal land. And it's just, can't have one without the other again, I guess.
Well, you might get Hillary Clinton on electionbettingodds.com. She's got a higher percentage chance of getting the nomination than Warren. Interesting, right?
Interesting. Very, very interesting. I know you wanted to talk about Victoria's Secret a couple of weeks ago, and I only know this because I follow you on Twitter. And you made a comment because there was a news report that broke a couple of weeks ago. I forgot to get you on it last week, where several of the models alleged that there was, a pattern of sexual harassment there. Obviously, a very serious issue. You, of course, made a comment. I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll let you make the comment that you made and the point that you made. But I want to talk about the buyout of Victoria's Secret, how it was sold for a song, basically, and how it covers up some of the rich and the powerful that were raping and pillaging one Mr. Epstein and his buddy, right? And we'll get to that and tie that in. But let's talk about first the news from a few weeks ago where several of the models were alleging a pattern of sexual harassment at the company.
Sure. And I just made a joke that I won't apologize for, sort of along the lines of, what do you expect when you got all these scantily clad women walking around and the entire focus of your company is to get men to ogle women? And so, I just made a joke to that effect, basically. But
and it was a joke, ladies, to be clear, a joke.
Hey, but the more serious, implications are why we're talking about it here today. And that, of course, is Les Wexner's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein and how more details of their relationship have come to light since Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. And, now they're basically burying, it's like what they do, right? This isn't conspiracy stuff. We've seen how it plays out now. It's all out in the open. They take the company private. What is the parent company? You have to remind me. Is it L Brands?
L Brands.
That's right.
Absolutely.
So, it'll take it private out of L Brands, which is a conglomerate that owns a bunch of front-facing brands like Victoria's Secret, and they'll let it fade off into the ether until no one remembers it anymore, right? I mean, that's how these things happen, right?
Correct. And again, we end up not digging into the relationship with Jeff Epstein and Rape Island, as I'm calling it, and whatever the heck they call this plane and all the other nasty stuff that went on that, people are aware of. And we can't seemingly as a society get to anyone else that was involved at that higher level, that higher echelon, right, of wealth. We can find no one else guilty that's very wealthy other than the guy who didn't kill himself.
I mean, it says, I can post this link. So I haven't fully digested this article and I haven't been keeping the pulse on this thoroughly, but there was a Financial Times article last week that said UK regulators opened an investigation into the links between the Barclays chief, that person's name is Jess Staley, and the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein after receiving a bunch of emails supplied by no other than JP Morgan Chase. And so this is deep, folks. I mean, I'll post the link, but there's a whole lot of stuff going on here with a lot of financial elites and institutions and money managers, etc.
Again, and that's on a broader scale. That's on a global scale. I'll take something that's, near and dear to people from Chicago. R. Kelly was an icon in Chicago for decades, right? Musical genius. We all know now that he was a serial piece of shit, a rapist, and kidnapper. I could continue. We all know where that went. But again, even in a case like that, which is now a federal case, but even on a state level or on a city level, how many people in Chicago, music producers, talent agents, promoters didn't know that this was going on. Enablers, right? All his buddies, everybody that was around him that knew. All of these people knew, and nobody else gets arrested. If you and me and two friends decide to sell marijuana and it hasn't been legalized in the state that we sell it, and we all know about it, and it's a big enough quantity, that's conspiracy. And that carries years and years of prison time. There's hundreds of thousands of non-violent drug offenders in prison because the girlfriend knew and didn't tell on the boyfriend, or the friend knew and didn't tell on the friend, and they can prove it. And that's all it takes to make a conspiracy case. It's beyond me why we can't apply the same standard, or choose not to, as a society when it comes to women, when it comes to little girls being raped, molested, kidnapped, held against their will, all the other stuff that the R. Kellys and the Epsteins of the world were doing. No one else gets taken to court for this. It's beyond me.
Well, they're
Can we stop and frisk those fuckers?
That's exactly what I was going to say, right? So in New York, that's exactly what I was going to tie it back to. They'll stop and frisk you with no probable cause whatsoever. But here we have a pedophilia ring that affects princes and presidents and some of the most well-known financial institutions in the world, with a seemingly sticky enough web to chase these stories around. And exactly right. Nothing's being done about it. That's exactly the point that I was going to make. And I was also going to point to this other case, and I'll post the link of this French author. I don't know if you saw this story, who in the 80s and 90s was openly writing about his pedophilia and having sex with young children, and was celebrated and revered for it in France, and was never prosecuted until this day. And now he's like hiding out in some, I don't know if it was the Amalfi Coast or some other Italian island. And this New York Times reporter tracked him down for an interview. I mean, they were celebrating this guy, right?
It's just insane.
It's crazy.
Just insane. Yeah. It's, again, and I know I have these conversations with my boys and my nieces and my wife and cousins and family about, how all it takes is, one sexual predator out there, how you have to be careful. You don't want to, look at the world in a completely jaded way, but you also want to make sure that, your loved ones are protected and safe as much as you can, protect them. Right. And alert them to the dangers that are out there. And so it's just, it makes me furious that, police departments and prosecutors, both on the state and federal level, and even the city level, have all the time in the world for stupid shit, but can't make time for stuff like this. If we want to get into a deeper discussion, there was a big scandal here in Austin where, the rape kits had just been sitting at the city offices for months and months and months. Again, I can go out any weekend to a bar on 6th Street to go listen to my favorite band, and there's cops standing all over the place. And that's a good thing. Again, I come from a town in Mexico where there's no police department right now. Not a one. There's no, not a police officer there. So it's all run by either cartels or the Marines or, whoever decides they're going to be the law enforcement group for the week. I know what that's like. That's not a pretty picture. I'm not asking for that. I'm saying if there's money in the budget to have a couple of officers standing at every corner of every bar, there should be some money in the budget to fucking test the rape kits. These are women that are saying, hey, I was raped. Can you test me so I can prove it, so we can file a case, so I can get this asshole off the street, so he's not raping little girls and other women. I don't see where the disconnect happens, where an adult looks at that and says, no, that's not a priority. But meanwhile, we have an infinite war on drugs simultaneously as we legalize marijuana in most of this country and a lot of the world. It's just bonkers.
And almost mushrooms now. They're talking about mushroom stocks on CNBC and stuff.
Yeah.
If you're white collar, you can have a mushroom company. If you're not, you get arrested for having mushrooms.
Exactly. Let's switch it to a lighter note. Did you hear about the MAGA pigeons?
I didn't, but I told you my pigeon story, so tell me yours.
I love it. This is hilarious. So pigeons, this was ahead of the debates, right, in Vegas. Pigeons with tiny Make American Great Again hats is what they put on the hats. Make American Great Again. Had hats glued to their heads, were released in downtown Vegas this past week. in what appears to be, as NBC News reported, a sarcastic statement of loyalty to the president. And a mock protest of Nevada's coming Democratic presidential caucuses. So this is the funniest part of this whole thing. Do you know what the group that took credit for this stunt calls itself?
No.
PUTIN. Pigeons United to Interfere Now.
That's hilarious.
That's it. That's my happy story. That's how I bring it back to something that'll make you laugh, man. So yeah, a group calling itself Putin.
So you know what I want to know. I mean, these are obviously domestic pigeons. They got the pigeons back and have since removed the hats, or there's just a bunch of pigeons out there now in the wild with MAGA hats on.
So this organization is setting traps in hope of removing the pigeons' hats before rehabilitating and releasing the birds. They're wearing the hats with the help of eyelash glue.
Oh, PETA's about to do war with Putin.
That's all I got, Nick. I can't close it out better than that. I would like to highlight again, before we get out of here, some companies that are worth looking at. Can I get your take? You're headed to PDAC here in a little bit. Can I get your take on companies that you're interested in visiting with that you want to either vet, learn more about, or simply just, catch up with?
You put me on the spot, but one that I recommended just yesterday that I've been looking at for a long, long time, as you know, is Chakana Copper. And I laid out the whole rationale yesterday in the letter about, being offered 50-cent stock while it was still private and not wanting to come in behind 32 or 30, I think 32 million shares, I guess it was, at a penny and 5 cents. And so how the whole saga has played out, I'm making this long, I'm sorry. But the share structure eventually, gave way and did what it always does. It eroded, has come all the way down to 15, 16, 17 cents. They've been waiting for like a year or more to get this permit to drill their expanded land package, which has a couple of dozen high-grade tourmaline breccia pipes that have delivered some fantastic results, like over 400 meters of over 2% copper equivalent from just one of the pipes. Like I said, there's a couple of dozen. So a lot of people I talk to and know, and me personally, have been anxious to see the rest of the package drilled. And it seems to be approaching. They don't have the permits yet. That's the risk, of course. And that's what I would like to know more about. So Chakana Copper is one, and I'll tell you, we didn't talk about silver at all, but I wrote about silver in one of my issues last week with the gold silver ratio being a bit out of whack recently, over 80. And I might go talk to Mag.
It's going to stay out of whack.
It's a story I don't know that well, and this is a big well, down in that area, the Juanicipio deposit, right? I want to go get a little bit more familiar with Mag Silver, especially because that thing is, is being built right now, and that could be great timing for a strong silver run. So those are two easy ones, I think.
Agreed. Yeah, they're in the Fresnillo district of Zacatecas. They're about an hour and a half away from the town that my parents were born and raised in, and what's home. And so, yeah, definitely if you're looking for leverage, that would definitely provide it, right? A company that I've followed again, for years. It's been in the portfolio for years. I've written checks for. In the past, I bought it in the open market. It's been dormant for 2 years, much like several of the other exploration companies that have been in the portfolio that I refuse to sell because I want to see the assets explored. But K2 Gold added a property recently in California that John Robbins called the single best early stage gold camp he's ever seen. Now, I know that this property is likely to meet some opposition environmentally, but I've been told, and I'm looking forward to visiting the project, that there is a way forward that deals with that in a transparent and responsible way. We'll see if that's the case. And then, the secondary property, the non-flagship, is the Wells property. And they just had news on that today. They had some exploration results, some trenches that were decent, 2.15 grams per ton gold over 8 meters. I get the sense that field work they announced earlier today was announced to maybe joint venture that project and get that into somebody's hands that can work it because of how prospective the Mojave Gold project in California is. So I think that keeping an eye on K2 Gold and doing some due diligence would be wise. It's a part of the Discovery group of companies headed by John Robbins, $7.4 million market cap. That's Canadian, with a heck of a team behind it and what appears to be a gold asset that is very prospective at just about the perfect time with gold at 1642, right?
That's right. And still a good share structure too. The stock has held up relatively well. They were able to raise money at the same price a couple of times and still under 50 million shares out. Right.
And that's really it, right? Back to referencing the 2 subscriber notes that I received this week. If companies have either added value, companies like Almaden Minerals that now have a robust resource and obvious leverage in today's price environment when it comes to gold and silver. The Advantage Lithiums of the world. Sure, we wanted the buyout to be higher, but again, there's upside there through the Orocobre shares. But that company did what it was designed to do. It developed that Cauchari asset, the 75% of it. It did that well. The market just didn't reward it for it. Some of it was share structure. Some of it was the lithium market bottoming out, the bottom falling out of it and bottoming as we speak. And so it is what it is, but it's hard to sell a company that's got a market cap of $7 million, has 2-3 million in the bank, has talented management, serially successful management, and a great share structure. There's no reason to sell that company for another company unless you're looking for immediate returns because you want a company that's active and busy. And frankly, in the past couple of years, there just haven't been that many. We've had some exceptions, Teranga, the K92s, the Great Bears of the world. You got a couple of those right. I on a trade side, I got a couple of those right. But for the most part, exploration companies, the smaller ones that I am really attracted to, just haven't been exploring. So I'm excited for 2020. I think it's going to be a breakthrough year for exploration stocks. And I think we're going to see brand new discoveries finally in a cycle that we haven't seen in quite some time.
I'm ready. We talk about names all the time. I'm not looking to add a lot of new ones here, right? I'm circling in on the ones that I know are quality, and I'm excited to see them perform.
I like it. Assuming you still go to PDAC, when will you be out there, Mr. Hodge?
I'm only going for one day, so I'll be at PDAC all day next Sunday, walking the floor all morning, giving some interviews I've got scheduled, and then speaking in the afternoon. So next Sunday, catch me at PDAC.
There you go. You guys see a tall, smart, insightful guy, flag him down, say hello. He'll be out there. I will not be making this go around. I hope to make the next one. With everything going on in the world, I can't say I'm completely bummed out, but it should be an exciting climate. I think the temperature of the conference is going to be as good as it's been in quite some time. So yeah, I'm looking forward to your feedback from the conference. Should be good.
I look forward to providing it.
Excellent. Anything else on your mind you got to talk about, Mr. Hodge?
No, that's it.
I appreciate the therapy session as always. I am Gerardo Del Real, episode 58 of Bizarro World. We talked MAGA pigeons. We talked gold, the dollar, the bond market, juniors, coronavirus, takeouts, corruption, rape, Bloomberg, the debates. I think it's a pretty well-rounded podcast. Send us away, Mr. Hodge. This was episode 58, everybody. Have a great week.
As rounded as the nubs of pigeon toes that have been removed with human hair.
Be nice to pigeons, y'all. Bye.
See ya.